Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Institute for Personal Development, Kriya Yoga Ashram, where total consciousness is the new frontier.
Kriya Yoga is union of the individual with the divine. Join us as we explore the practices to initiate this process.
Good morning. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. Let's talk consciousness. I am your hostess, Lisa Winton, and with me is Kenny Toy, also known as Swami Jayananda, founder of the Institute for Personal Development, located here in Hampton, New Hampshire. Good morning, Swami. Thank you for being here today. How are you?
I'm doing very well today. How about you?
Well, I'm doing great today, too. Thanks for asking. And we'd like to thank you all for tuning in. Today on The Voice of Yoga, we will talk about the operation of spiritual law and why Mary Baker Eddy wrote, "You render the divine law of healing obscure and void when you weigh the human in the scale with the divine, or limit in any direction of thought the omnipresence and omnipotence of God." End of quote. Listen as we explain, in the light of divine truth, there is nothing else, only one perfect eternal life. In this show, we will discuss some of the benefits of being conscious of the divine creation and absent from the good and evil world of energy. Welcome to the Voice of Yoga. We are talking consciousness. Join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance to get the light in your soul and experience divine protection. So the title of today's show is The Science of Divine Protection. Sounds like there's something that we need to know and understand about that. What is divine protection?
To begin with, we will look at what divine protection isn't. Divine protection isn't spiritual power. It isn't a force that overcomes evil. Spirit is the light of truth which reveals the nothingness of anything unlike itself. Spirit is the power of one, the only self-existent power in the universe, in all of creation, and its absolute goodness without opposite. And the word science means to know. In this show, the science of divine protection is the process of knowing or being conscious of the divine creation, which doesn't destroy anything, but instead reveals the nothingness of the mental, material, good and evil belief in two powers. Without conscious awareness of divine truth, we seem to walk defenselessly among non-existent powers which appear to harm.
You said the science of divine protection is the process of knowing. How do you suggest we go about doing that?
What I've tried to do is stay with what Mary Baker Eddy says. You render the divine law of healing obscure and void when you weigh the human in the scale with the divine. So the first thing I try and do is separate the idea of human and divine, the unreal from the real. And in order to do this, we have to have what was called the mind of Christ. We had to learn how to repent or think differently. Having a background in Kriya Yoga, the idea of meditation fits very well with Mary Baker Eddy's concept of prayer. Meditation is a different way of perceiving things. We have to rise above corporeal sense. Meditation is the 7th stage of yoga, and the 5th stage of yoga is pratyahara, sense withdrawal. So what happens to consciousness when we are no longer being influenced by the 5 corporeal sense input? In light of the hero's journey, which begins with the separation, the journey, the return, the separation here is we must divide and conquer before we unite and stand. We have to know the difference between the unreal and the real. We have to know the difference between thinking with the 5 corporeal sense mind and knowing with what we will call your 7 spiritual senses. And this is all an inner event that we have to initiate, this process in development. And it comes back to the idea of being born again of spirit. Yoga meaning union with the divine. We separate from our dependency on what is visible and tangible, and also on what is invisible but tangible. And we rejoin or unite with what is invisible and intangible, which is spirit. And of course, Mary Baker Eddy is saying the exact same thing here when she says, or limit in any direction of thought the omnipresence and omnipotence of God. We can't bring forth the divine image with the mortal mind. The mind we are using to get us through this lifetime is incapable of dealing in the absolute. It works in duality. It works on contrast. What Krishnamurti had said, can the mind free itself from its own creation? And of course, we find that it can't. So we have to come out of thinking with the five corporeal senses, and then in this silence and stillness, we make the mind aware for the presence of divine mind, and then in that silence and stillness, we watch, wait, listen, and we let divine truth begin to illuminate our thought.
How do we know the difference if we are operating from the 7 spiritual centers or the 5 corporeal senses? What would be a good indication of that?
Well, what we judge by is the fruits. What is appearing in your experiences? Am I having problems, lack, limitation, sickness, suffering, disease? These are all of the things that are not what would be considered the fruits of the Spirit. The fruits of the Spirit are peace, love, joy, goodness, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, patience, temperance. And when your experiences are not reflecting the perfection of this divine influence, then we know that it's coming from someplace else. But we also know Spirit is the only power in the universe, and that anything that is not reflecting divine perfection is quote unquote unreal. It's not backed by the divine law, which means it's being driven by a belief. And this belief that we're talking about is a belief in 2 powers. Essentially, we have to change our belief. We have to know the truth. There is no opposition to divine law, and then become a faithful witness to that.
Swami, you had said spirit is the power of one, the only self-existent power in the universe, and without opposite. So when you mean that opposite, we're talking about good versus evil, hot, cold, things like that, those things that we judge in this mind that we're using.
Yeah, and a key question here, if God is all and all is good, what is evil? And then, of course, you could drill down a little bit further. If God is all, who are you? Who am I? These are some of the questions one begins to ask as thought shifts from a mental material basis to a spiritual basis. Jesus said, know the truth and it will make you free. He doesn't say believe the truth, think the truth, feel the truth, say the truth, ask the truth, but know the truth. Unbox the statement. What is knowing? What is truth? And what is freedom? Jesus also tells us to take no thought. So we begin with understanding the difference between thinking and knowing. The difference between the human mind, which Paul in the Bible calls carnal mind, Mary Baker Eddy calls mortal mind, and divine mind. The difference between thinking and knowing. The difference between duality, that which seems to be in half, and spirit, which is whole, complete, the absolute, the perfection of being. And again, once we learn to divide and conquer, then we can begin to unite and stand.
Let's unbox one of those questions that you had just asked earlier. What is freedom?
Yeah, when Jesus says, know the truth and it will make you free. So knowing is a mode of thinking with divine mind as opposed to the mortal mind. What is truth? Truth is the divine creation, the omnipresence, perfection of being, functioning everywhere, always. And what is freedom? Freedom is freedom from the belief in something other than the divine creation, the belief in two powers, which seems to be under karmic law, under material law, which is driven by a belief in two powers. It's not the same as divine law, which is self-existent power. Material law gets its appearance of power from this idea of belief.
Well, let's get back to the title of today's show, The Signs of Divine Protection. In your words, what do you think protection is?
When I think about it, protection is a fabricated concept to suit the mortal sense of life, which is unknown to divine self. Spirit being all without opposite, the only thing certain is life, everywhere, always. In truth, there's no need of protection because there's no danger. And yet, until we know this truth, we walk defenseless among these non-existent beliefs that seem to kill a personal sense of self.
So, Swami, you're saying in this mortal life, that's when we need protection. We think we need to protect ourselves from a head cold or put the seatbelt on when you get in the car, things like that for our personal safety. But if we are in this divine truth, then you're saying we have no need of that, even in the mortal life?
You would think we could be careless, emotional, reckless, and God is taking care of everything. But this is a process of knowing the truth. Like we say, first we have to divide and conquer before we unite and stand. Mary Baker Eddy called this being faithful and orderly with the objects of sense. In the Bible, it says, do not tempt the hand of God. This idea that we must master the mind-body complex before we walk reason through the open door of revelation is very important to understand, because today in what I would call the celebrity pseudo-spiritual community, people think you don't have to do anything because God is all. The misconception is God is watching over us. It doesn't work like this. God is running a perfect universe, and God is not withholding anything. What we are calling life isn't life at all. Life is hid with Christ in God. Life is perfect, whole, complete. This mental material world of energy is a belief in something other than the divine creation. Now, once you have developed this concept, this mental landscape that will now support the divine principle, it makes it a little bit easier to move forward. But you can't be careless, emotional, reckless, have that belief God can fix anything, mentality or attitude. We must take responsibility, learn how to control how we think, eventually stop thinking, make our mind aware for the presence of a belief in the divine creation. Then, with practice, as you learn to be guided from within by this spiritual light, your belief in the divine creation will graduate to faith. Faith is where your belief is now starting to externalize in your experience. So we learn by accepting and living in the knowledge of the infinite spiritual self does begin to take care of what seems to be a finite mortal sense of self.
We're going to pause right here to hear a word from our sponsor. Listeners, we'll be back with you in just a few moments. Institute for Personal Development Incorporated is a Kriya Yoga ashram offering yoga classes in all 8 stages of Kriya Yoga, including classes, personal training, teacher training, residential program, online live classes, and online products for self-discovery and transformation. Discover, learn, and practice one of the oldest and purest forms of yoga, Kriya Yoga, by uniting ancient religion with modern science. Visit www.ipdtransform.com. Namaste. Welcome back. For those just joining us, you are listening to The Voice of Yoga, and we are talking consciousness. So, Swami, I was thinking, we're born into this lifetime, and we have this overwhelmingly sense of this self-preservation. So it seems like we always are afraid of something that's going to happen to one of us, our family members, our friends, whatever. Let's talk more about why we seem to have this fear.
Yeah, well, fear is a defense mechanism for the false sense of self. If we don't believe we are a finite mortal being, then we would have to be spirit, an eternal spiritual being. However, the way that we're socialized today, we find fear is a wonderful motivator. It is the power of preservation and survival. And oftentimes when people lose motivation of fear, they fall into this lethargic state of being. They oftentimes become very depressed. And then what we try and do is we try and induce motivation. And most of this is because we do not understand ourselves spiritually. We don't understand the power of spirit. We don't have a principle. If we understood the purpose of life was to glorify the Creator, to be that place where the divine creative principle expressed itself through us, we would have a very different approach to our lives rather than trying to protect, improve, preserve this mortal sense of self. But because we don't have the leadership, we no longer have points of passage, rites of passage. We don't understand the benefit of principle-centered living anymore. And so we have therapy. We have drugs that help us deal with fear and oftentimes anger. Fear and anger work together. Anger is just fear turned outward. Depression is fear turned inward. And so violence and emotionality are things we not only have to try and learn to manage without developing willpower, so we use drugs in order to try and manage these conditions, which are natural conditions. But what we also know is what natural man doesn't have is spiritual principle, doesn't have spiritual life. In truth, life is not in matter, nor in mortal mind. Life is hid with Christ in God. And in Colossians 3:3, I'll read it. For ye are dead, and your life is hid with Christ in God. End of quote. And so the more we understand the message of the Bible, and the more we understand that life is the only certainty, life is eternal, it's perfect, it's whole, it's complete, we are in the wrong self. We have to graduate from identifying with the mental material world of energy and then knowing ourselves in the way that we are created, which is spirit.
Swami, you had talked earlier about the distinctions between faith and belief. Let's talk a little bit more about belief.
Yeah, belief is a hypnotic state. Hypnosis is a mental state of being not necessarily backed by spiritual substance. A dream state or illusion or delusion, which is thought to be real. And Jesus told us, take no thought. Matthew 6:25. I'll read it. Therefore I say unto you, take no thought for your life, what ye shall eat or what ye shall drink, nor yet for your body, what ye shall put on. Is not the life more than meat, and the body than raiment? End of quote. This isn't what we are doing today. Now, was he mad, or does he know something we are unaware of? In John 10:10, Jesus says, and I'll read it, the thief cometh not, but for to steal and to kill and to destroy. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. End of quote. The thief and the robber is the mental material concept of life. It is mind and body. And I am is the truth, the realization of the one divine self.
So it sounds like we have to start somewhere. We have to start with the belief, and then that would turn into faith. I think that's how the progression goes, correct?
Yeah, we go from belief to faith to understanding. Unconscious awareness to self-conscious awareness to superconscious awareness. Caterpillar, chrysalis, butterfly. That's the progression in consciousness. But now you have to understand that we can believe in anything. We believe we're a finite mortal being. We can believe in God and believe in a devil. We can believe in sickness, suffering, disease, lack, limitation. We can believe in perfect health. But belief in truth, believing in the divine creation, now that belief will graduate into faith. Belief in the divine principle then begins to demonstrate. Now that's very different than working with mortal belief. With mortal belief and thought, we can change finite bad to finite good. But what you find is you're still under the law of karma. You're still in the cycle of death and rebirth. Belief in truth, though, will lead to liberation, freedom from the law of karma, freedom from the belief in two powers.
Swami, you had said earlier, use the phrase spiritual substance, and it reminded me of the verse in Hebrews 11:1. I'll read it. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And just kind of wanted to maybe get your take on this verse. I know we talk about this periodically.
Yeah, well, Paul is telling us right there, faith is where we start to see the evidence. Spirit is a demonstrable principle. It's a law. But we must be conscious of it in order to activate it in experience. Consciousness is experience, and true consciousness is true health. And then we start to see life in matter or health in matter must be given up for health in spirit. There is this progression that enables us to develop faith into understanding. Understanding is when we are able to demonstrate divine law with scientific certainty. Now we are living, moving, and having our being under the divine law, which is now being under divine protection. Nothing can ever happen that does not have divine quality if you are not conscious of this good and evil world of mental energy.
That's really interesting what you're just talking about, because further on verse 3, the verse states, "Through faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of God, so that things which are seen were not made of things which do appear." End of the verse.
Right. With the mortal mind, we see what isn't here, and we are blind to what is here. The only thing that is here is the divine creation. Jesus said the kingdom of heaven is at hand, but we must be conscious of it. This idea of sow to the spirit or sow to the flesh, building a mental landscape to support the divine principle, is what we call the path of knowledge in Kriya Yoga. It's helpful to have a theory behind activity, to keep step with the idea of being scientific, the concept of object and shadow. Only in this case, the object is spirit, which is invisible and intangible to corporeal sense, because we have to shift from thinking to knowing. What we do is try and understand the absolute in finite terms in order to lift consciousness out of duality into the unified level, letting go of the mental material moorings in order to rise into spiritual truth.
So I'm going to read a passage here from Science and Health. This is on page 468. And the question is, what is the scientific statement of being? And the answer, I'll read it. There is no life, truth, intelligence, nor substance in matter. All is infinite mind and its infinite manifestation, for God is all in all. Spirit is immortal truth. Matter is mortal error. Spirit is the real and eternal. Matter is the unreal and temporal. Spirit is God, and man is his image and likeness. Therefore, man is not material, he is spiritual. Your thoughts?
Well, like Jesus said, know the truth. He didn't say read it. We have to walk reason through the open door of revelation. We have to master the mind-body complex, which means we have to be born again of spirit. And this is a process, and it has an evidence procedure. We need to internalize a completely different symbol for validation in the mind-body complex. The physical body, this idea of animal magnetism, this idea of believing in mortality, has the appearance of power because of this strong belief. And it's not just on a personal level, because we have the collective consciousness. And so initiating the process of mastering the mind-body complex is a practice that you instill in order to prepare the body for the reception of a completely different symbol for validation. The body comes in with a pattern: preservation and survival, animal magnetism. In order for us to awaken from this, we really have to give the body something other than matter and mind for validation. Like attracts like. And if we draw from duality, which is fear and limitation, that's what we become. But if we draw from truth and wholeness, if we now internalize the invisible, intangible omnipresence of spirit as your new symbol for validation, now the panel's wired, the lid is off, and you have the support of the mind-body complex for your quest of spiritual identity.
That completes our show for today. Listeners, be sure to visit the website www.ipdtransform.com. As you scroll down, you'll see several buttons there that you could press that would further your understanding. Swami, any final thoughts about today's show?
Well, I would like to encourage people to join the Kriya Yoga Spiritual Advance, get the light in your soul, and experience divine protection. Namaste.
Thank you for listening to our program, The Voice of Yoga. This is Lisa Winton along with Swami Jayananda signing off. Have a wonderful Kriya Yoga realization. Namaste.